Hello and welcome to take two of trying to record this because I did not realize Audacity was not recording properly the first time. Here goes nothing. Today I'm gonna be talking about another TV show because I have beef with The Good Place Season 4. This was originally going to be about the start of the season. Way back a year ago when I started season 4, it made me annoyed enough to stop watching halfway through. But since my parents were watching it, I recently went back to it and decided to persevere to the end. And while those issues I had with the first half were nothing compared to my issues with the second half. So whenever the season first came out on Netflix, I watched it week by week. It was quite a few months after I'd finished binging the previous 3 seasons, and I was excited to see how things would conclude, how their experiment to save humanity would progress. And I did not like it. It sucked. I hated it enough that I wrote an answer on Quora outlining my disdain with the season. So I will read that for you now. Over the last few weeks, I have been watching season 4 of The Good Place, and I have to say I am a little disappointed. I really enjoyed the first season. It was funny and original, and the twists were great. I love Veronica Mars and Parks and Recs. It was cool to see Kristen Bell and Adam Scott, and Manny Jacinto's character, Jason, was 10 out of 10. But I have one major problem with season 4 that has really been affecting my enjoyment of it, namely, everyone constantly hating on Brent. Here's a scenario. Brent as a character is meant to be completely arrogant and yet completely oblivious to his arrogance. He genuinely believes he is at the high end of humanity. He lived a privileged lifestyle and thus struggles to relate to the common man. However, at this point he is almost the only likable character in my humble opinion. The reason almost every other character feels the need to complain about him at least once in every conversation. It's honestly really irritating and makes that character come off as a much bigger jerk because they won't stop mentioning how he's the scum of the earth. Why should I prefer Simone if her character has been reduced to A, complaining and B, jeopardizing everyone? Or John, who's still always gossiping? Eleanor seems to think Brent is the only problem. Are they trying to shovel it down our throats? Don't be like Brent. Everyone hates you, rich tax-dodging Republican. Or do they expect that the main demographic for the show are people who hate Brent as much as the other characters do, so they can pat themselves on the back? The thing is, Brent is an excellent source of comedy and quite charismatic. I genuinely enjoy the layers of satire put into his character. He comes across as much more ridiculous than inconsiderate, despite us constantly being told he is the latter, and also the worst person ever. There was an episode where I wrote a book that was full of caricatures of the other characters, which really offended them. From an audience perspective, the book sounded much more entertainingly bad than horribly offensive. So forcing him to apologize at the end came off as quite grating. The thing is, he is never intentionally mean or spiteful, he just exists in his own self-centered paradigm, and we're all self-centered sometimes. The latest episode swung on for dear life on the edge of a hellhole. Simone refused to help because she despised him. Chidi only helped because of morality, and he also didn't like him. John didn't want to get his hands dirty. None of the other characters have improved, so why is Brent the problem? Why not save him because he's a human and it's incredibly cruel to leave someone for dead? No one has any more compassion than Brent does, so stop making him the bad guy. He's the primary source of comedy, so stop trying to make us feel bad for liking him. I like Brent Norwalk, and I think he deserves to be liked. Now, as you can imagine, this was a bit of a controversial take, and I got some contention for it. But it was such a relief to just be able to vent about it. Which I guess is also what I'm doing now. One commenter questioned why I continued watching if I didn't like it. In my reply, I mentioned that I had liked the last episode I'd seen, that being the one that follows Chidi from birth to adulthood to as many afterlives, but I never actually ended up watching past that episode. I moved on to other things, other shows, other interests. Perhaps writing the answer had just fully turned me off the show completely, given me time to really assess my opinions and realize that I didn't actually want to submit myself to this anymore. Months passed, almost a year passed. More episodes came out, but I didn't watch them. A global pandemic happened. The Good Place was the last thing on my mind. But recently my parents decided to finally catch up on The Good Place. They'd only gotten up to season 2. And it was kind of nice rewatching some of the earlier seasons with them, episodes I liked. But the looming presence of the inevitable season 4 approaching ever closer kept me apprehensive. When season 4 started, I tried to block it out, listened to YouTube on my phone and focused on my comics. But it was hard to ignore the TV, and I couldn't help but wonder if it was really as unpleasant as I'd remembered. So I started to enjoy those episodes I'd hated so much, and I didn't like them any better a second time. But it gave me some new ideas of why it didn't work. And that is, Brent doesn't even make sense as a person who would irritate Eleanor the most. So if you're unfamiliar with the premise for this season, essentially, Eleanor, Chidi, Tahani, Jason, and Michael have found out that the point system, which determines whether you belong in the good place or the bad place after your death, is corrupt, and for the last 500 years all humans have been sent to the bad place to be horribly tortured. At first they think the demons of the bad place have interfered with the point system, but they realize the problem is actually industrialization, causing inaction to have a much greater impact than previously, unintentionally exploiting child labor or killing the rainforest. The premise of the first few seasons was that Michael, a demon, had designed a new form of torture which involved making four humans think they were in the good place. In season 4, this concept is revisited as a way to repeat the experiment with 4 new humans and prove that people can improve and become better people in the afterlife. That when the 4 humans improved the first time, it wasn't a fluke. The judge allows the bad place to decide which 4 humans will be part of the experiment. Our team, the original four, soon find out that the bad place deliberately picked humans who will clash with them. A bog-dwelling blogger journalist guy who lives on celebrity gossip for Tahani, who's a celebrity obsessed for status and elitism. Chidi's ex-girlfriend Simone for Chidi, a boring dull lady for wacky incompetent street kid for Floridian Jason. At least they said she was dull. I would say she was more rude / polite / cold / unfriendly, but honestly that doesn't matter because it turns out she was a demon in disguise with infiltration and sabotage of the experiment from the bad place, and she's replaced by Chidi as the 4th member pretty much right away. So that left Brent for Eleanor. But Eleanor's immediate adverse reaction to Brent was kind of jarring and disproportionate. My biggest issue is that he doesn't line up with personalities of anyone previously established to have clashed with her. John and Simone both had varying levels of actual involvement with the people they were targeted towards, but Brent's just some middle-aged rich white guy who is detrimentally self-obsessed. Because it's not portrayed as Eleanor doesn't like him because she sees the selfishness of her past self in him. It's portrayed as she doesn't like him because she thinks he's a pretentious bigot. And honestly, I would argue that keeping that kind of attitude just made things worse. So who does Eleanor have far more personal conflict with? Well, there's Joe, the clean energy crusader guy from outside the shopping centre who was handing out leaflets about saving the environment. Her getting aggravated at him was what got her killed by a bunch of trolleys slamming it into a truck, while she ended up in the fake good place initially. So, case closed, right? Eleanor's changed enough that she wouldn't blame him for her death, but things would suddenly be awkward. But we have to account for how things changed. At the end of season 2, the judge agrees to let Michael change the timeline so Eleanor, Chidi, Jason, and Tahani don't die, to give them a second chance on Earth at becoming good people and earn enough points to get into the good place. So the point she should have been killed, Michael pushes Eleanor out of the way of the trolleys. Her near-death experience makes her reconsider her life choices, and she ends up joining the Clean Energy Crusaders and joining Joe, handing out leaflets, wanting to become a better person. But it wears her out. It seems like hard work with not enough payoff, and it's easier to give up. So she quits and regresses back into her old trashy ways, before Michael gives her another nudge towards becoming a good person, helping her to reconnect with Chidi and the others. And I would argue that Chidi being the only person who could help Eleanor be a good person is kind of dumb, and if they wanted to prove she could actually improve without the factors that helped her improve in the afterlife, they can't just make sure she finds the guy who was the main factor that helped her improve in the afterlife. And I know, like, the whole point was Michael and Janet were totally cheating and interfering way more than they should have, but still, like, guys, come on, just take it easy, see if Eleanor can improve on her own, man. But anyway, I digress. The point I want to make here is that even though she sort of ended up being friends with Joe, she did just ditch him, go back to being a bad person, then go to Australia for a year, and then die again. So as far as we were informed, things were never resolved between them, so there would be room for conflict, especially since, as this commenter pointed out on the wiki, Joe might have had a crush on Eleanor. You might say he's enough of a good person that the bad place wouldn't want to risk putting him in the experiment because he might be too easy to improve, but it's not like he's perfect. We see him get frustrated with Eleanor, etc., etc. And remember, the agenda really seemed focused on who were the worst for the experimenters, not who were the worst people. And some of the people she is personally connected to are pretty bad, like her trashy friends Brittany and Madison, who are pretty much a whole lot like Eleanor used to be. They would be a pretty great pick, unless they're considered too similar to Eleanor and might too easily be improved the way Eleanor was improved. We see they made it to the good place in the finale, which I wasn't a fan of because it's, like even pointed out, they're still kind of trashy, and it opens up all sorts of questions about the standards of the good place and how much people have to change to end up there, and I don't like not seeing the journey when we could have at least seen a bit of the journey of how they improved. Another one might be the old boss at a trashy company. She sold fake drugs for the pharmaceutical thing, and that was scamming people, and she's just like, oh yeah, happily working for this awful company. So that would have, I think, been kind of interesting. And there's also her mother, Donna Shellstrop, who had faked her death and got a new identity as Diana Tremaine and got a new partner, Dave, and stepdaughter, Patricia. Although Eleanor got some kind of closure with her mother in Chapter 33, A Fractured Inheritance. That wouldn't have healed all her wounds. Eleanor had a terrible childhood and her mother deserted her. That's not a relationship you can fix in one episode. In the finale, we find out she's on good terms with her mother. In fact, it seems like it's connected to the reason Chidi is ready to leave the good place. But we don't see any of the rest of that journey, so it just seems a bit hollow and undeserved. Hey, yeah, remember your mum from 17 episodes ago? Let's mention her again, because I, Chidi, want to leave you, Eleanor, forever. But we'll get to that later. So we're seeing her have a vendetta against people trying to do good things and a vendetta against people who hurt her, but her having a vendetta against a random middle-aged businessman who, by the way, went to Princeton comes completely out of left field and really is just a way of making things unnecessarily political. But let's put that all to the side because I've seen the second half of the season. The second half. So, what happens? As I mentioned earlier in the show, the problem with the afterlife is that everyone is being sent to the bad place to be tortured because the point system cannot handle the complications of the modern world. With the experiment in the first half of the season, Eleanor and team allegedly managed to prove that people could improve in the afterlife if given the right conditions and encouragement. But to everyone's shock, the judge decides that the best solution from this information would be to reset the universe and start from scratch. There's a big emphasis placed on Chidi having to be the one to come up with the answer, make a decision on a new way to design the afterlife that the good place, bad place, and judge will all agree to. they have to come up with a decision quickly before the judge resets everything. And then they stick with the spur of the moment decision they come up with last minute as the thing to base the whole afterlife on, dismissing other options but settling for something that is by no means an improvement. What is this great fantabulous ideal? Well, basically it's that if they didn't get enough points, they go through a personalized test targeted to their psychology designed to help them improve, become a good enough person to get into the good place. And if they eventually fail to improve, they go to the bad place. Maybe it doesn't sound too lame, but considering there was a fair amount of build-up to it, yeah, it was pretty lame. But I think anything they went with would be disappointing because of the incomprehensible magnitude of the situation. We're talking about the answer to solving the universe. We find out that before Chidi had his memory wiped at the start of the season, he had written "there is no answer" and "Eleanor is the answer" on a note he handed to Janet. We don't follow through on this because we get an answer and then act like it'll solve everything. And yeah, how did Eleanor end up being the answer again? I mean, I don't think that really happened. It would have been fine maybe if they had been maybe more consistent, had an answer that made a callback to the beginning, like Michael's neighborhood torch idea that we'd seen repeated and repeated could be implemented as an actual solution, like they just done with their experiment. Or take, for example, the idea of an actual medium place, something that's not as magical as the good place, but at least has none of the torture of the bad place. They dismiss it as quickly as it comes up because they're too focused on overhauling the system as much as possible. And sure, adding a proper medium place alone would not be a good fix, but if you combine it with a more reasonable point system, it could be good. Because otherwise it's still splitting people into the best and the worst. We see that for the most part, the medium place works for Mindy. But really, this in itself I can live with. It was whatever. What really made me mad was the last two episodes. Episode 11 ends with the gang taking a hot air balloon through the evening sky to finally go to the good place. It's peaceful, idyllic, hopeful. The episode itself was a bit rushed and all over the place, but the end was cute. If it had ended there, I'd be fine. Because then we'd have that delicious freedom of ambiguity for us fans to decide for ourselves what happened next, for us to imagine what the good place is like. It's like the one rule of TV to never show the thing you've spent the whole time building up towards, because you're going to be disappointing. Because this is the thing we've been rooting for, too. And we still remember when the gang were in the mail office of the good place and Eleanor was determined to get through that door because they were inches away from everything they had wanted. But you can't show us the other side of the door, and you especially can't show us the good place. Tell us this thing everything has been building towards sucks, and then come up with another BS solution in 2 minutes after the characters have been there for like an hour in the second last episode. That is far, far, far too rushed. So, what is the problem with the good place? Well, people can have everything, and it lasts for eternity, so they're bored. What is the solution? A door to turn yourself into stardust and stop existing. I was trying to work out if it's a sort of metaphor for euthanasia or something. They mention that the good place is like a one long vacation, and vacations are only good because they end. But people don't go and walk through a euthanasia door after a vacation. They go back to their job, to their ordinary life. Just very drastic as the first and only solution that doesn't even try to address people's needs. You could relate it to the idea that money doesn't buy happiness. Being able to have anything does not correlate with good mental health. So then give people the opportunity to go to a place where they can't get anything on a whim. Something ordinary, like the medium place, so they can rejuvenate their perspective and get a break from their vacation. The euthanasia door just introduces a different permanency. It's not a fix-all. But there's no time to think about more subtle changes to improve the good place because the show has to wrap up in 2 episodes. But in the last episode, we're basically told that people don't use the door because they're tired of the good place. They use it because they've achieved self-actualization or something. More specifically, they get a feeling and they're like, well, time to go. Hasta mañana till we meet again. Don't know where. Anyway, they tell us it comes from a place of being content with finality. But this doesn't address the darker, more disturbing connotations, like the people who walk through the door because they're struggling with their mental health, or people who go through because their friend did, and it just introduces another set of a million problems. But anyway, the last episode. In the last episode, we essentially follow each of the characters at the time they choose to go through the door. Seriously, what the hell makes you think I want to see that? The thing is, you can have closure without permanency. This episode didn't make me sad, it made me angry. From a structural level to an emotional level, it didn't work. If we're talking about structure, we're talking about introducing a plot device in the second last episode purely to make the last episode as dismal as possible. There's a reason why most shows don't end with killing off all the main characters. We don't want to see that far ahead of the story. Let us decide their future. But no. We say goodbye to Jason, and when we say goodbye to Tahani, and then to Jeannie, and then Jason for real this time, and then Eleanor. But the stuff we see them do in their final moments is so trivial. It was fun to get a Nick Offerman cameo, but seriously, Tahani makes a perfect chair, and now she's ticked off her bucket list. Sure, they probably did plenty of interesting things in the meantime, but we didn't see any of that. From our perspective, it's almost as though no time has passed between them arriving in the good place and then wanting to leave it. It's just so unsatisfying. I wanted relief. I wanted... The hard part is over. Time for a well-deserved break. Not time to say goodbye again because we hate you, dear viewer. The characters in the last episode simultaneously feel too different to the ones we'd grown with, and too similar to how we'd see them, that it doesn't really seem like they had spent very long there. Because seriously, how many Jeremy Baramies does it take to make a chair? So what would I have done? Probably end up with episode 11, with them on that balloon to the good place, so we never actually see the good place, just some clear ambiguity about their fate. That's hopeful, because I know I keep saying it, but 2 episodes is not enough time to introduce and unsolve another monumental problem. We just did that in the last few episodes. We don't want to have to deal with that again. Maybe we could have had another flashback episode. Something that focused on Eleanor as a kid. Something that shows hope for her to eventually become a good person. I would have liked that. And you know what? I didn't hate every part of the last episode. I liked the part where Michael got a real live frog for the doorman and he ends up calling it Mr. Jumpy Legs. And him and Michael telling the guy who gave him his mail to take it sleazy. That was a pretty good joke, pretty good callback, because this show actually has some pretty great jokes. It's a comedy, so why you want to make us depressed with the ending when you really didn't have to? I hate the euthanasia door and all the implications that come with it. I hate that. Apparently, in the many Jeremy Baramies sense, no one is even trying to come up with any better ideas for the afterlife. So I've been ranting about this for quite a while now, and this is the second time I've had to do this rant because of the recording. Messing up the first time, and hopefully it actually worked this time, because I haven't checked yet, but... oh, fingers crossed. Anyway. So it's just good to just vent, I guess. But that's enough venting from me. I'm officially done with this. I'm officially done with this show. Please remind me that I'm done with this show now and to not care about it anymore. Because I don't. I promise. Okay, thank you for watching. I hope you liked this, or maybe you didn't because you liked the ending of the show and now you're mad at me. So put it in the comments, tell me why you hate me now. Thank you. Okay, cool, see you next time.